felt
Oh my
louder than the
god!
thunder outside.
What is it? What's wrong?
The storm
I heard a
worsened
noise.
quickly.
It's okay. I'm here.
Phone signals died. Roads flooded. Leaving the building became impossible. Emergency lights cast long shadows across the hallway, turning the familiar workplace into something strange and uncertain. Daniel realized she was shivering violently. There was a small maintenance room nearby where he sometimes rested during double shifts. It wasn't much, just a worn couch, a kettle, and a stack of spare uniforms, but it was dry and warm enough to wait out the storm. He offered the space carefully, giving her every chance to refuse so her dignity could remain intact. After a long silence, she nodded. Inside the tiny room, the world felt quieter. Rain still roared outside, but the walls softened it into a distant rhythm. Daniel turned on the kettle and found a clean shirt from the spare stack. He placed it on the chair without looking at her, keeping his voice steady and respectful as he suggested she change out of the soaked clothes before she caught a fever. Trust is fragile, especially for people who carry responsibility like armor. He understood that. So he stepped outside the room and waited in the dim hallway, counting slow breaths, thinking about Lila sleeping at home with the neighbor who watched her during his late shifts. When Elena finally called softly that he could come back in, she was wrapped in the oversized shirt, sleeves folded at the wrists. Without the sharp edges of authority, she looked younger, almost lost. Daniel handed her a cup of hot tea. Their fingers didn't touch this time, but something unspoken settled between them anyway, a quiet understanding that storms reveal truths ordinary days hide. At first they spoke only about practical things. Flooded streets, broken power lines, how long the storm might last. But silence has a way of inviting honesty. She asked about the photo taped inside his wallet when he pulled it out to check the time. The night the storm came, Daniel thought the worst thing he would face was another power outage and a frightened child asking if the roof would hold. He had no idea that within a few hours, his quiet, carefully controlled life would shift in a way he had spent years trying to avoid. Rain hammered the narrow streets, wind bent the old streetlights, and the city felt like it was holding its breath. Daniel pulled his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders as he ran from the bus stop toward the office building where he worked late most evenings, not because he loved the job, but because overtime meant groceries, school shoes, and a future that looked a little less fragile for his daughter, Lila. Inside the nearly empty building, the lights flickered. The security guard had already left to check a flooded basement level, and the elevators were down. Daniel climbed the stairs two at a time, thinking only about finishing his last report before rushing home. Halfway up, he heard a sound that didn't belong to the storm. It was a quiet, uneven breath, like someone trying not to cry. He slowed, listening. On the landing between floors sat a woman, soaked from the rain, her hair clinging to her face, her hands trembling from cold. For a moment he didn't recognize her without the sharp suit and composed expression she wore every day. Then realization struck. It was Elena, the company's director, the woman whose decisions shaped everyone's lives in that building, including his. She looked up, startled, as if being seen was the last thing she wanted. Pride and exhaustion fought across her face. Daniel knew that look. He had seen it in the mirror many nights after Lila fell asleep, when bills spread across the table like accusations. Without thinking about consequences or awkward explanations, he stepped closer and quietly offered his jacket. She hesitated and used to accepting help, but the cold finally won. Her fingers brushed his as she took it, and the simple human contact. He told her about Lila, about becoming a father overnight, about learning to braid hair from online videos and cook meals that stretched for days. He spoke simply, without drama, the way people do when hardship has become routine. Elena listened more closely than anyone ever had. In return, she admitted how lonely leadership could be, how every decision carried invisible weight, how strength sometimes meant having no place to fall apart. Hours passed unnoticed. The storm outside slowly weakened, but something warmer grew in the quiet room. Not romance born from fantasy, but connection built from truth. Two tired people, each protecting someone else, discovering they didn't have to be strong alone for once. Sometime near dawn, exhaustion finally claimed her. She fell asleep sitting against the wall, still holding the empty teacup. Daniel gently took it from her hands and placed a folded blanket over her shoulders. He sat on the floor nearby, careful to keep distance, watching the gray light of morning creep under the door. He thought about how strange life was, how a single storm could place two completely different worlds in the same small room. When she woke, sunlight had replaced thunder. For a moment she looked confused, then embarrassed, as memory returned. She stood quickly, apologizing for the inconvenience, for the weakness, for things that needed no apology. Daniel simply shook his head and offered a quiet reassurance that everyone needs shelter sometimes. They left the building together once the streets cleared. Outside, the city looked washed clean, as if the storm had carried something heavy away. At the corner where their paths separated, they paused. No promises were spoken. No dramatic confessions. Just a simple thank you that held more meaning than long speeches.